Welcome.
Hello. Oh, I
I
can
see
see you.
them.
Okay, so I should sign into Zoom too, probably, huh?
I think we'll be okay.
Okay, then I won't.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
We'll start the meeting in just a minute. Let's let everybody at least get logged in. Okay.
Since I'm giving the speech, should I be on there or no? Is it
Hi, Phyllis.
You'll be all right.
just they can hear me? Okay.
I can hear you.
Phyllis. Okay.
All right. Adam, is it all right for us to start, or should I wait another minute?
There's Jessica. Probably.
See everyone?
Question is, do we have a quorum?
Got 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 6 so far.
Got 7 on the phone. I got Lance here with us. Are we just missing? I don't see Nick, maybe, but I think I see everyone else.
Nick and a couple other people. Natalie.
I see Natalie, Janan, Bill, Phyllis.
Hi, this is Natalie.
Oh, you're there. Okay.
Natalie.
Yeah, so Heather, I think we're good to proceed. If we see Nick or anyone else pop up, we'll admit them to the meeting.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody. This is Heather Tice. I'm chair of the PTAC committee, and I will, in order to do roll call, I'm going to give it over to Serena so that she can do roll call and we can get everybody logged on and counted. And then just when you guys speak, if you could say your name and your title, you can just say PTAC member or whatever title you have. I think that would be helpful. And then when we actually do a vote, I will ask for a approval and get a motion, and then we'll go back to Serena so she can take the roll call for that too, for the yay and nay. Okay. All right, Serena, you're on for our call to order, and I mean our attendance.
So we can do, Serena, if you want to do just a quick roll call and see who we've got with us,
Okay.
and then Serena will run through kind of an intro.
Okay, I'll go
rules
through
for the meeting.
I'll go through a roll. If everybody wants to just go through, let's see. Lance Fahey is here with us. So Heather here. Bill Wilson. Mike Waskowski. Jinan Amin.
Yes, I'm here.
Phyllis.
Good. Yes, I'm here.
Natalie.
Yep.
What am I missing? Anyone else? Any other committee members? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Heather. Good evening. My name's Serena Pearson, and as our PTAC chair, Heather said, I will be facilitating the Zoom video portion of the meeting. With me here is Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. He will work alongside Heather Tice to facilitate the meeting proceedings. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and public access channel, cable channel 25. I want to provide a few reminders to ensure that the provisions of the Kansas Open Meeting Act are met. Committee members, you must state your name and title each time you speak. All motions will need to be stated clearly. After a motion is made and seconded, I will call on committee members individually to provide their vote. The chair will then need to announce whether the motion carried and the count of the vote. Members of the public are allowed to speak to regular agenda items. General public comment will be received in written form at the beginning of the meeting. Individuals who signed up in advance to provide public comment remotely will be called upon by name. When you are called on, please unmute your listening device and state your name before speaking. The chair will then call for in-person public comment for those without access to technology options. Staff present will direct you to the podium to speak following social distancing and safety protocols. During the meeting, please mute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon found on the lower left-hand side of the Zoom menu next to the video icon. When you are muted, a red line will appear over the icon. Muting your microphone during the meeting will make it easier for everyone to hear. You'll just have to remember to unmute if and when you want to speak. In some cases, I may mute or unmute people as needed. Each time you speak, please remember to state your name and title for the benefit of those listening remotely. In the menu, you can also turn your camera on or off by clicking the video icon. For the purposes of this public meeting, please keep your video on during the meeting. If you are participating by phone, you can click *6 to unmute your phone. For those using Zoom, somewhere on your screen, you will see a choice to toggle between speaker and gallery view. Speaker view shows the active speaker. Gallery view tiles all the meeting participants. And now I'll turn the meeting back over to Heather Tice.
Thank you, Serena. This is Heather Tice, Chair of PTAC. I would like to move on to the approval of minutes for March. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes and review them? And if there's any comment, please do so now. All right, there's no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
This is Janan, PTAC member. I think that the minutes of meeting from our last meeting are not inclusive. They do not mention input on route number 6 and route number 10 and safety issues that I brought up.
What we are kind of doing, and I can go back and revise those, but we are putting the audio on the city agenda, the city website, so that people can listen to the meeting. So we're not putting as detailed of minutes as we used to because the audio is on there now. But I can certainly add some more information on that if you like. So it was the information on the Route 6 and what was it? Safety issues?
Yes, safety issues, amenities, and continuous delay problems with on Route 10.
Okay. All right. Thanks for your feedback on that.
All right. Is there anything else? This is Heather Tice. Is there any other corrections or comments before I ask for a motion to approve? All right. With those changes already cited, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the minutes as changed.
This is Mike Wasikowski with PTAC. I so move.
Thank you. May I have a second?
This is Natalie Yoza. I second. PTAC member.
Thank you, Natalie. All right, in order to make a vote, Serena, I'll put it over to you so we can get a yay and nay vote.
Okay.
And then I'll announce if our motion carries.
Okay. Lance?
Yay.
Heather?
Yay.
Bill? Tony? Audio. Oh.
Yes.
Okay. Mike?
Yay.
Jinan?
Aye.
Phyllis?
Yes.
Natalie?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, I counted 7 yays and 0 nays, so the motion carries, and we'll approve the minutes as changed. Thank you, everyone. Motion carries. And we'll move on to agenda items. Introduction to discussion items. I think that might be Adam.
Sure, thank you, Heather. Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. I wanted to make sure we took a little time this first meeting to carve out time just for me to introduce myself to you all and get a little bit of my background, and then also have it be a chance for you all to just refresh each other on your skill sets and your experiences and what you bring to the table. I think it's important when we have discussions to know where each other are coming from and what core competencies we each have. So just wanted to take some time to do that at this time. So I'll start and just give a brief introduction to myself. So my name's Adam Weigel. I grew up in central Kansas. I've been coming to Lawrence since I was very young, probably around 9 or 10 years old. I had a couple older siblings who went to school here. So I was coming up to town for that, and then I myself lived here from 2006 to 2018. And with the exception of 1 year I was in town during that time, I did spend a year in Chile attempting to teach English to high schoolers and learning a little bit of Spanish along the way. Planning-wise, I got my graduate degree from KU in urban planning, worked for the city for a little bit with Jessica and the MPO doing bicycle and pedestrian work, and also worked down the road at Topeka Metro, first as a transit planner 1 and eventually as the director of planning there. The last couple of years I've been up in the DC area. I was a bicycle and pedestrian coordinator for Prince William County, which is just outside of DC, and in the last about year of my time there I was with a transit consulting firm that did a lot of work in the region. So spent about 6 months with a team that was embedded at the Pentagon, doing transit work but also multimodal work, a big hub of transportation there in the region. And then worked on some various kind of East Coast nationwide type projects related to corridor planning and bus route redesign, that sort of thing. So just wanted you all to know kind of where I've been. I'm very excited to come back to Lawrence. This is definitely home, and really, really excited to have the ability to plan for a bus system that I use on a daily basis, and just really excited to be back here. So now I might ask that we go through PTAC members, and you all just give me I've had one-on-one meetings with several of you, but if you could give the group just a short bit of background about yourself and kind of where you're coming from, I think that would be helpful for all of us, so we kind of know everyone's perspective. So Heather, I might let you start.
Okay. This is Heather Tice. I'm chair of the PTAC committee. I've been on the PTAC committee since I think 2014. So I've been on for a little while. I work at Cottonwood Incorporated here in Lawrence. I've worked here for 27 years. So I'm familiar with RT and the access that our folks at Cottonwood need in order to get to their jobs in the community and such. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be in PTAC, and I'll pass it on to the next one.
Adam Weigel, Transit Manager. I'm just going to ask folks based on the order of my screen, if that's okay. So Mike, I'll let you go next.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Wazkowski. I'm also on PTAC. I've been in the region since 2007 when I started grad school here at KU. Just left the Army as a civilian employee, and I'm now working at InTouch Solutions as a business systems analyst there. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to provide my analytic and project management expertise to the team.
Great, thank you. Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. Bill, you're next on my screen.
Oh, okay. Bill Wilson, been in Lawrence now just about 2.5 years. Prior to moving here, well, what I'm doing here is I'm the administrator for a medical practice that we primarily based out of LMH. I'm a business guy, I'm not a doctor. And prior to moving here in Illinois, I moved here from Bloomington, Normal, Illinois, where Illinois State Farm are. There I served as a trustee for the transit system in that community. It was a governing board, and served on that for 6 years, and chairman for the last 2 years there. And anyway, so I was able to gain from little experience to quite a bit of exposure to transit system and similar size towns and college town, and have been on this PTAC since last fall.
Great, thank you. Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. Phyllis, would you like to go next?
Sure. Phyllis Farrer, PTAC member. I've lived in Lawrence almost 50 years now. Came to KU and never left, except for 1.5 years of living in Germany. My profession is a teacher, so I'm all about education. And for most of my career, I split my job at West Middle School. It was West Junior High at the time, between teaching German and teaching English Language Arts and Social Studies. I come to transit as a consumer because I've traveled extensively, specifically every couple of years in Germany, but also in other countries where systems are well developed and extremely accessible for the local people as well as tourists just coming through and using transit for a very short time in many places. So the last 10 years of my career, I worked for the state of Kansas as a foreign language consultant for teachers across the state. And I've been on PTAC. This is the third of my 3-year term. Third year of my 3-year term.
Great, thank you, Phyllis. Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. Natalie, you're next.
Hi, I'm Natalie Yoza, PTAC member. I'm also Associate General Counsel for the Kansas Board of Regents. I got my law degree at KU, and I also studied journalism at KU for my undergrad. I've been in Lawrence 15 years, maybe a little longer than that. But I have a lot of background in contracts and negotiations with unions. I have a lot of interest in the public transportation system. Again, as a parent to kids, that I would like to have the ability to use the system, and also I have my parents that live in town, and as they get older and might have needs for the public transportation, I believe it's just really important giving access to people through public transportation.
Great, thank you. Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. Janan, you're next.
So this is Janan Amin, a new member in the PTAC. I'm a user of the public transit in Lawrence. Here I live for a 6th year. All of my years in the United States have been in Lawrence. I too have extensive experience with public transit in many European cities. Currently working on multimodal mobility transit mobility project for Lawrence.
Great, thank you. Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. Alan, I see you on the screen next. And maybe, Alan, can you hear us, or can you unmute? Still nothing yet.
Alan, you're still on mute.
We can't hear him, yeah. There you go.
I can hear you fine. I'm trying to unmute.
There we go.
There you are.
Yeah, Al Acklam, just PTAC member, second year. Went to high school here in Lawrence, graduated from KU, degree in civil engineering, and been in the area actually for quite some time, with about 7 years in the Air Force. So had a fair amount of travel worldwide, and nice to be back in this area. And recently retired, so I had some extra time to look at the opportunity to give something back to the community and to take a look at things I'm interested in. So that's why I'm on the committee.
Great, thank you very much. Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. Lance, would you like to give a quick intro for yourself?
I'm Lance Fay, and I am the Vice Chair of the Public Transportation Advisory Committee. I've lived in Lawrence since 1997. I have a bachelor's degree in communication from Emporia State University. I currently work for Hilltop Child Development Center. I'm also a local songwriter and musician. I'm visually impaired, and so I rely on public transportation for all of my transportation needs. I was involved in helping persuade the city to start a fixed-route public transportation system, and have been an advocate for accessibility and clear communications regarding our transportation system ever since. I've been on PTAC since the beginning of 2017.
Wonderful, thank you. So Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. I think, I did listen to, there was a meeting you all had, I think last November, where that was still in the hiring process, and you all were talking about what you would look for in a new transit manager, and I certainly hope I can live up to some of that. You had some exciting things you were looking for, but maybe that was a good time. I don't know if you all have any kind of additional questions for me at this time that you were still interested in knowing, or just had some concerns about. I'm happy to take a moment if anybody has any thoughts. Okay. Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I'm always open for questions and feedback, whatever y'all have. It's energizing hearing where everybody's coming from. There's a lot of different skills on this committee, so I hope we can, I'm looking forward to seeking your experience and input on a lot of things we do, so that's very exciting. Heather, I'll turn it back to you so we can move.
Okay. Thank you for the introductions. It was nice to hear a little bit more about everybody. Agenda item 2 is the planned route change for August 2020. It's a discussion item, and I think there was information sent out in the packet, so hopefully everybody was able to review that. Adam, do you want to talk through it at all?
Sure. This is Adam Weigel, Transit Parking Manager. I'll have Serena share that screen, and I'll grab the mouse and we can walk through it. I do want to let's see if it comes up. Looks like it does. So looks like it's working, Serena.
Oh, okay, good.
Grab the mouse then. I'm sure there's a technological way for us to have me take control of the mouse, but sometimes walking over to grab it is just faster. Okay. So I hope everyone had time to review this, but I did want to just walk through each of the routes, kind of where we started with our proposed changes, followed by what we heard when people gave us public input, and then talk about how that informed our final, kind of our plans changes. And, definitely still open for more discussion and feedback, what I'll probably do is pause after each route as I walk through it, and give us some time if there's still lingering concerns or thoughts or discussion about how we might tweak things. We can certainly talk about that. So it's my hope that we can, each year when we do planned route changes, that we can put together a similar document to this where we really characterize where we started and then where we ended based on what we heard from the public. I think that will be an important way for us to be transparent and really let people know that their feedback really makes a difference in what we ultimately decide to do. So just some general things here. So every year we evaluate route alignments for possible changes. There's a number of things that might influence us to consider making a change. Some of the obvious ones would be if there's changes in the road network that mandate that we make certain changes. You'll see a couple of those instances this time around. More on the data analysis side from our end, as we look at ridership at different stops and at different areas of town, that might guide our decisions to make changes. Other reasons could be if there's new developments, new land uses that we think could help us get more ridership or get people where they need to go. That would be a consideration, as well as something that Janan brought up about the minutes from last meeting, which is when there are significant timing challenges with bus routes. That's something we would look at for how to change routes to keep our buses on time and set expectations. So this information went out to the public in a few different ways. So it went out via Lawrence Listens. KU also did a direct email to students to get input. There were certainly people who saw the story about this in the paper, and they would reply to us via email or via phone and say, they didn't want to, or they couldn't figure out how to submit info via the online Lawrence Listens, so they reached out directly, and we captured that information and tried to really drive people, over the slightly over a month that we had this out there for input. We really tried to hammer away at Twitter and Facebook and any way we could to continue to encourage people to give us their thoughts. So we'll step into the first route. So is this readable on everyone's screen, or is this too small? Let me see if I can. Okay. All right, I'm not sure I can zoom here. So Route 6. So one of the issues on this route, there's just some challenges getting back into and out of Rock Chalk Park. That stop in particular makes us drive pretty deep into a parking lot that, particularly when there are events out there, can just be really impactful for on-time performance. We can get stuck in traffic and people backing out of stalls and things like that. Certainly from my perspective, there's some safety considerations when we have to take a bus through a parking lot, where you just get concerned about the different auto patterns that might not be predictable. So one of the things we looked at was, at the same time, there was a LMH outpatient facility that is slated to open this September out in that same area, and this change was seeking to serve that location. In particular, we see pretty low ridership at Rock Chalk Park, about 7 people per day. So our initial proposal looked at, can we shift service over to LMH Health, and if you still want to go to Rock Chalk Park, there is a sidewalk network between those two locations. It's about a half mile, which is about a 10-minute walk. And that was our initial proposal out there to the public. We did, largely have positive feedback to this. There were some comments that made us think about access to Rock Chalk Park. It'd be nice to still be able to serve that as directly as we can. And I know some people were not as sure that it was a reasonable walking distance to walk about a half mile. So one of the ultimate changes we looked at making were maintaining the initial proposed route change, but looking to add a couple of stops at, and I have to look this up because there's so many Rock Chalk names out there. Rock Chalk Drive and Rock Chalk Lane. That cuts the walking distance down to about half. If we add a couple stops there, it's essentially at the furthest southern end of that parking lot for Sports Pavilion. So we think that might still help us keep access to Rock Chalk Park, even though it's not quite as direct as it was before, but still be able to serve the new medical facility in the area. So I might pause before we move on to the next route and just ask if there's any lingering concerns, thoughts from folks about that route.
This is Phyllis Fair, PTAC member. I was pleased to see the very logical, as far as I'm concerned, a very logical addition of the stop right there at the intersection, or the T, where the drive comes out of Rock Chalk Park, Rock Chalk Drive, and Rock Chalk Lane. I happen to be one of those people who does occasionally take the bus out to the pavilion, and that amount of walking seems very reasonable to get, and also serves the other end of the Sports Pavilion area very well.
This is Natalie, Yoza, PTAC member, and I'm having trouble visualizing where those two meet. Is that by the pond, or is it by the tennis courts, or by the actual Sports Pavilion building? Where in that large parking lot are we talking?
This is Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. It's like Phyllis said, it's a T intersection. It's probably closest to the big tennis facility, would be the most adjacent thing right next to it. Any other thoughts from folks before we move to the next route? Okay, so this is Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. Got to remember that. You'll probably get a sense. I'm a data-driven person, so you all might get maybe overloaded with data, but that's kind of the way I do things. So if we need to make adjustments in future meetings, I'm fine with that. But I do like to kind of lay out how we've made our decisions with kind of the percentages and the numbers that we hear back from folks. I think that is not always the entire reason we make decisions, but I think it's an important part of it. So we'll move on to Route 7. So changes on Route 7, there were a couple different, I think it's maybe easier to look at the map first, if I'm honest. The couple changes we looked at were for a couple different reasons. The first was on Route 7's northbound trip back to downtown, it from Louisiana Street jogs on 21st and then back on Kentucky to 19th. That has been done because the right turn from 19th from Louisiana onto 19th is just not feasible the way things are currently set up. So one of the upcoming changes that is forcing us to need to do something is there's some bicycle boulevard work along 21st Street, and it's no longer going to be feasible for us to take a right turn from Louisiana onto 21st. So in tandem with that project, there is some restriping being done at Louisiana and 19th here to accommodate our buses being able to make a right-hand turn. So the primary change is that if you can envision the right turn only lane as you approach 19th Street heading north on Louisiana. That will be hashed out. The current center lane will become a through and right turn lane, which creates a wider berth for us to be able to turn a bus at that corner. Another small adjustment that helps us out is they've done some lane shifting on 19th Street over here. They pushed westbound lanes just a little further north. They narrowed them a little bit and pushed them north, which gives us just a little more room to make that turn. So this is one of those changes that we in essence have to make because of road pattern changes made it as such, but it's my understanding they've done, I talked through the engineers and they talked about we took buses out here and we tried to make these turns, and we had cones to see what type of space a 40-foot bus would need. Worst case scenario, our largest bus. So this particular change, one of the things that I like about it from a transit perspective is that it does keep service bidirectional. So we've got a route that runs both directions on the same stretch of street, as opposed to having essentially a one-way loop in the middle of this route. I think that's ultimately a valuable thing for us to look at. The other change that was initially proposed was eliminating the section on the southern end of the route where it takes 27th over to Lawrence Avenue and back on 31st. This was proposed to save some time on that route, I believe particularly during rush hour, having challenges with that left turn from Lawrence onto 31st that's unsignalized. And as you'll see, we definitely heard some feedback, some constructive feedback on that particular change. So as we went through comments that people gave back to us, it became evident that there was a lot of concern about people who live in that Holcomb Park neighborhood. First of all, being able to access Holcomb Park, but also children in that neighborhood being able to go east-west so they can get to Billy Mills Middle School and Lawrence High School. So that would be, something you would lose if you weren't able to get on here and head over to Louisiana for that middle school and high school. Ultimately, I spent a little more time looking at the on-time performance and wasn't convinced that it was, so out of balance that we couldn't continue that loop. I think that access to schools is an important thing for us to continue being able to do. So the ultimate change we're looking at is maintaining that southern section as it is today. And the only change to this route would be to take service off of 21st and Kentucky and bring it all onto 19th and Louisiana in both directions. We're looking at the appropriate place to add a stop going northbound near LHS. There's some challenges over there with all the homes, just trying to figure out the right place to put that. But I think we'll be able to find something. And then there's a stop real close to 19th and Kentucky on Kentucky. That one should be relatively simple to find a home for. On 19th Street, probably might be near Kentucky, might be near Tennessee. We'll have to look a little more closely at exactly where that stop will be relocated to. So this one definitely had some more, as you can tell from these feedback charts, some more, would negatively affect people when we heard that. So do we have any thoughts, comments, additional concerns from PTAC members?
Phyllis Fair, PTAC member again. I want to commend you for listening or watching the comments from the neighborhood and analyzing them so carefully, because I think reasoning that they had was really good, and I'm glad we responded to that.
This is Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. Thank you, Phyllis. I think it'll be critical for us to show this process as we move forward. There's, on this particular instance, the concerns from the neighborhood were appropriate and we could accommodate them. I think we will absolutely come up to some issues where there's going to be more challenging pros and cons, and we might have to make changes that negatively impact some folks in the sake of the greater good. But I think this process gives us a platform to at least be honest and open with people about what we're using to make those decisions. So yes, I appreciate the comments, and I think people had very valid concerns with this route. Any other thoughts from members before we move to the next route? I do want to be cognizant of time. I know it's mostly my fault for talking through these, but we do have some other agenda items as well, so just want to make sure we've got time to digest everything. Okay, we'll move on. So Route 9. Route 9, and you'll also see in Route 29, are both being impacted by an upcoming roadway pattern change driven by a KDOT safety project. So I've brought the image here of the work that's going to go in at where Wakarusa meets 27th and K10. And this particular intersection, I imagine some of you have driven through it or ridden the bus through it, and it is a real challenge. The primary change is that if you are headed southbound on Wakarusa, you are no longer going to be able to continue on to 27th. The new pattern change will force you out onto K10. So we've got a couple routes that do travel south on Wakarusa and over to 27th, one of those being Route 9. And our initial proposed change was to create a loop between Clinton Parkway, Inverness, 27th, and Wakarusa that essentially goes the direction we are allowed to travel through that intersection. So it would go clockwise pattern, whereas currently this route runs down here up to 24th, and it does that in both directions. It will no longer be able to do it in the counterclockwise direction. So that was one change. Another proposed change with our initial proposal was to bring service over to Lawrence Avenue. This was to help fill in for the service that was proposed to be shifted away from Route 7. And you will see there were some concerns about this. Some of these concerns are not going to be things we can address. There were certainly people who live down here on 27th or use those stops and would like to see continued service in both directions. It's just not going to be possible for us to do that with the road pattern change. It has to be just in one direction or not at all. So that was just a challenge that we couldn't really overcome. There, other comments related to folks who lived in that Lawrence Avenue, Holcomb area who didn't see the Route 9 service as really being helpful as a replacement for Route 7. Those two routes don't go the same places, so you can understand that. You can understand that feedback. I did take a look, though. Part of me was interested if what these two corridors look like. The Castle corridor and the Lawrence Avenue corridor. Even if we're not moving Route 7, I wondered if it was still a good idea to bring Route 9 service over to Lawrence. Ultimately, there's enough ridership along here in comparison to Lawrence Avenue that for now, as you'll see in our final proposal, not quite enough data to say that we should move Route 9 service off of Castleton onto Lawrence at this time. So the one change we're looking to sticking with is doing a one-direction loop that allows us to maintain service down here. I will say there would be the option of doing bidirectional on Clinton and Inverness, just doing that in both directions. But we're just trying to be cognizant to the ridership that does occur down here that would be cut off from service if we did something like that. So this time I'll ask again for committee members if there's any feedback or thoughts on Route 9.
Yeah, Adam, this is Al Ackman, PTAC member. I'm going to have to sign off now, but I looked at all the routes and the adjustments, and I thought you really have done a good job of responding to the comments appropriately with the changes or the adjustments that you've made. See you next week.
I appreciate that, Alan. Thank you. Other folks, any thoughts? Okay. In the interest of time, we'll keep moving. So Route 29, Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. Route 29, similar issues. The one component that was a little different with this route was definitely some of the feedback we heard, and I'll show you our initial proposal, was essentially to eliminate the loop over here from Clinton Parkway, Walker's and 27th, and instead use that extra time that we would have to take the route downtown. We did have some definitely favorable comments from people who use the route and would still be on the portions of the route that would still exist, who are interested in the idea of it going downtown. It would be an additional destination that they could reach. The challenge was there are student apartments out in this area, and Route 29 is a coordinated route with KU. One of its purposes is to get students to and from campus, and there's a lot of student housing out in this area. So a lot of the negative or unsupportive comments we heard from people, and you can see a sizable percentage, were from students who in particular maybe chose to live at Aberdeen because it was on a bus route and would lose access to get to campus. So ultimately our decision here was not to make any major changes to where the route goes, but instead, again, making directional changes based on the road pattern out there. We have to do somewhat of a figure eight. So as we come out on Clinton Parkway, that bus would turn south on Inverness. It would take the loop in the clockwise direction that it can take it, and then it would dive back into 24th Street to hit those apartment complexes on its way back towards campus. So ultimately, no major changes on this. We just have to do a little bit interesting route pattern in order to still serve the places that we're trying to serve. So I'll pause at this time if there's any thoughts or comments on where this route's headed.
I do. Bill Wilson, PTAC. Maybe I missed earlier. I apologize if I did. Is there any correlation between the number of comments and the amount of ridership? So if you get a whole bunch of comments, say from students that live way out there, that moved out there because it had service, but you've got 2 riders a day. Is that anyway? Is there a correlation between comments and ridership?
So Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. That's a good question, Bill. It is. I don't know that I would say there's a correlation between the number of comments we got and the number of riders, but what I would say is that we did, with all of these, we're cross-referencing our ridership to essentially make sure that it's not we want to provide balance. So it's not just a few really loud people who are, changing our decision-making paradigm, when ultimately the ridership doesn't, support that type of change. So we are, looking at ridership at different stops as a component of our decision-making, not just the, self-selected group of folks who decided to comment on what we put out. In this particular case, while there's some nuance, I guess, ridership, I believe, let's see if I have it up here. So we looked, the stop right next to Aberdeen, ridership shows 8 passengers a day. That's not a landslide number of people, in comparison to some other stops. One of the nuances, I guess, would be that just given class schedules, that's not necessarily 8 people, because people might have different class schedules. You might only go to campus Mondays and Wednesdays, or 3 days a week, and a different set of people might come on the other days. So while ridership might be a certain level, our effect might be on, 20 or 25 or 30 people. It's hard to say how that's exactly spread out, and more analysis would have to be done. I think anytime we're looking at taking away service from an area, I really want to make sure, I guess, that our data is well-rounded in our decision-making. So those were just some of our considerations. Other thoughts from members on Route 29? Okay, I'm going to be cognizant of time here. Those are the last of the city and coordinated routes. So Route 34 and 38 are both KU funded and KU routes. Rather than kind of walk through those, I might just open up right now if there are any questions or concerns or thoughts about the changes made to Route 34 and Route 38. And I guess I'll say up front that Route 38, ultimately there's no changes being made to that route after feedback. Route 34 has a little different alignment, where it's going to take a loop, primarily for timing issues. Two-way travel on Jayhawk Boulevard was proving challenging for them to stay on.
And planned COVID precautions discussion with the Lawrence Transit. I think there were some links that we had on the agenda. Adam, do you want to touch base on that?
Yes. Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. We won't necessarily walk through those links, but I provided those as some of the things we're thinking about as we try to make the buses as safe as possible. So COVID response is essentially what I've done since I got here. We've fit in some other things, but that was definitely one of the hot items in mid-March. So we've been learning along the way and trying to follow what other agencies are doing and making things as safe as we can. I'll just run through kind of where we stand now. We have a couple of ionized ozone misters, which is a disinfecting misting unit that a lot of transit agencies are using, and our contractor is using those in the evenings on every bus. Throughout the day, there are drivers and other personnel who are out on routes helping wipe down and spray that ozone mist with spray bottles on high-touch surfaces that people touch throughout the day. Railings, seat back covers, that sort of thing that people would put their hands on, the pull cords, that sort of thing. Our drivers are being asked to wear masks, definitely anytime anyone is inside the bus. If we've given them some freedom, if there's no one inside their bus, or if they have their 10-minute layover, or waiting at the library, they have some freedom to not wear a mask for a few minutes before they get back on route. We recently got a large shipment of masks in, disposable masks, and we're going to make those available on all buses so that we can start really messaging people if they really need to have a mask on while they're inside the bus. And if they don't have one, then we will provide one. So what we really don't want to do is be turning away people from using the bus. We just want to make sure we're being as safe as possible. Additionally, we also have windows being left open for extra ventilation as much as possible. It gets a little tougher when it's so hot outside, but we're really trying to leave at least a couple windows open on every bus just to get good airflow in there. And lastly, one of the things we're working on is we're pursuing some prototype plexiglass shields from local glass companies to create a barrier between the driver and if people need to walk in the front door. So right now we've got passengers doing rear door boarding only. So they board and exit in the rear doors just to create some separation between themselves and the drivers. But looking forward, we do have some smaller cutaway vehicles that we operate on fixed routes, and those vehicles do not have rear doors. So we're trying to figure out a solution to just create, kind of the sneeze guard type barrier that you see in various businesses and things, to help drivers feel a little more safe and just limit contact as much as we can. So those are some of the things that we are doing right now. We're definitely keeping an eye on ridership. That is a challenge as it creeps up, and other agencies are facing that as well as they figure out how to make those decisions between keeping social distancing and not turning away people at the bus. Unfortunately, we haven't needed to be turning away people based on capacity issues at this point, but we've probably got some further discussions to make sure we're doing things safely while still serving people as best we can. So I guess this time I would ask if members have other thoughts, things that we should be looking into when it comes to COVID response, or just other input.
Lance Fay, Vice Chair, PTAC. So in my experience riding the buses in the last month or two, communication between riders and drivers can sometimes be more of a challenge than normal because, of course, speaking through a mask kind of mutes your voice. It's harder to understand. I've had some situations where the drivers were not clear as to where I needed to get off the bus. And so clear communication, trying to, when possible, talk to the riders maybe before the route starts, or kind of reconfirm what they're requesting for a stop. And I think this is something that kind of lies on the drivers, and most of them do a good job of this, but it might be something to kind of keep up with. Also, when you're at one of the transfer points where there are many buses and you're having to enter through the rear, especially if the marquee is not working properly, seeing which bus you're supposed to enter has been difficult at times because a posted sign is oftentimes on a tinted window. And I've had to ask a few times, is this the 11? Is this? And I could not see it. And so that's been a little bit of a concern. So I think those are two things that we should look into, and kind of making sure that the drivers and supervisors are on top of that.
Great, good feedback. I appreciate that. Other thoughts?
This is Natalie, Yoza, PTAC member. I was wondering what sort of decrease you've seen in ridership since March when the COVID stay-at-home orders started, and then as they've been lifting them through June, are you seeing an uptick in the ridership, or is it still lower?
So this is Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. We saw ridership on city routes get down to around 400 to 500 passengers per day, and that is around 25 to 30% of normal levels. That probably happened within the first couple weeks. It was a pretty steep drop, and but it definitely leveled out at around there. We didn't see it drop much below those numbers. I recently looked at the May numbers, and looks like we're up around 800 riders a day, so it is starting to come back a little bit. And certainly keeping an eye on KU's plans for reopening and how that might affect our ability to get people on the bus safely. But yes, it does look to me like it's starting to come back up a little bit.
This is Mike Wazkowski, PTAC member. I had two questions, Adam. One, I assume I know the answer already. Have we had any bus drivers diagnosed as positive for COVID yet?
Adam Weigel, transit and parking manager. No, we have not experienced
that. That's what I assume. Second question I have is, what's our contingency plan for the event that a bus driver does get diagnosed?
Adam Weigel, transit and parking manager. So that was one of the first COVID response type things we were looking at, working with KU on. We have a document that I can certainly share with this group that essentially lines out the number of bus drivers we have, and as that drops, what services would drop. Largely, it looks at trying to maintain span of service. So I believe in the beginning, the attempt is to just reduce frequency of buses, and then it starts to reduce the span of service, maybe not as late or maybe not starting as early. Things get pretty dire before we're cutting routes. But I can certainly share a little more info on kind of how we plan for reduction in operators if that were to happen, and what we would do.
This is Mike Wazkowski, PTAC. Thank you for that. The follow-on that I have with that is, what about contacting people who are actually riders on those routes? Do we have a contingency plan for that?
It's Adam Weigel, transit and parking manager. So I'm just thinking through, if someone were to test positive, we would go through, the Douglas County Health Department's process, and they attempt to do contact tracing. I can imagine that being a real challenge with riders, and trying to get that information out. Our process would probably have to be pretty manual, right? I mean, we're probably talking about announcements on buses or signage on certain routes to help people understand that a positive case was on this route on this date. So if you were in that group, please get yourself tested. That's kind of the direction my mind would head. Do others have different thoughts on that?
Lance Fay, Vice Chair PTAC. So would there be also, say, some sort of a public safety announcement on that would go out, through more, not just on the buses, but through some public means, so that people that know that, hey, their father or whoever rides Route 11 every day needs to know that that occurred?
Adam Weigel, transit and parking manager. That's a great point. Yeah, I think that would need to be a component of it, something larger and more broad to make sure it, something that serious, we'd probably try to use any channel we can think of to make sure people get notified and we respond appropriately.
This is Natalie, Yoza, PTAC member, but what I think I'm hearing you saying is that you would coordinate with the Douglas County Public Health Department in order to craft a reasonable response, and it probably wouldn't matter if it was a rider or a driver, but they do have tracing, and I know that they've been deploying that in order to track down some of the things that have happened in Lawrence recently.
This is Mike Wazkowski, PTAC member. I think we settled on the idea that it's basically impossible to actually automatically track everyone that's on a route on any given day. And I assume that Douglas County Health Department is smart enough to realize the best way to do that then is PR campaign. What route were they on? When were they on? And advocate anyone who was on that route at that date. See a doctor, contact someone to say, hey, I may need to get tested or I may need to get quarantined.
Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. I think you're on the right track there. Yeah, I mean, it'd be with Douglas County Health Department, definitely, but probably also with our city communication staff and you know, using those channels. All right, any other thoughts? All right, Heather, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, Heather Tice, PTAC Chair. Our last item from the agenda is the meeting calendar, future study sessions, regular agenda items, and a draft meeting calendar. So,
This is
I think-
Adam
go
Weigel,
ahead.
Transit and Parking Manager. I'll just give a brief overview, but this I think is going to be really important. I don't know how much historically we've kind of asked you all to put together what you want your year to look like, what things that you want to talk about as we move forward. There'll definitely be things that are pressing enough that I'll need to bring them to the agenda, but it's my intent each month to meet a couple weeks prior to our meeting with Heather and with Lance to put together an agenda for the upcoming meeting. And I think the document that I attached is really my first attempt just to list all the things that I think we might want to talk about, but I definitely want input from you all on, are there things missing from that list? I'd be interested to know your thoughts on, you know, the study session versus regular agenda item component. If there's things we want to just learn more about collectively as a group, so we're all speaking the same language when we talk about different issues, versus, you know, specific agenda items where we have an action on it. So I'd certainly take at this meeting if you had ideas about things that you don't see on the list that you'd like to include. But it's also something that can absolutely be ongoing, and as you think of things, just communicate them to me and Heather and Lance, and we can try to get them on agendas. And in particular for next month's meeting, if there's particular things that you see that you really want us to talk about soon, I'd be interested to hear that. So with that, I'll open it up to thoughts and discussion.
Lance Fay, Vice Chair, PTAC. I'd be curious to know more about what particulars people would have in mind for study sessions. That in particular draws a question mark in my head.
Heather Tice, PTAC Chair. Anything else? Anybody else? Okay. Well, that's our agenda items. We're moving down to quick updates. Cutaway vehicle purchasing. Adam?
Yes, so Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. So every year the state, KDOT, puts out a bid. They get a state contract for Cutaway vehicles. So these are the smaller transit vehicles that you see primarily operating like paratransit trips. But here in Lawrence, we do have some Cutaway vehicles that we use on fixed route as well. So they're just a smaller light-duty vehicle instead of a big heavy-duty bus. We've got some critical needs as far as vehicle procurement that we need to address. Definitely on the fixed route side, but also just keeping ahead of our vehicles on the paratransit side. This bleeds a little bit into the next update about the electric buses, but even though we have secured that grant for 5 electric buses, those won't hit the streets for a couple of years. It's just going to take some time for that process to work through. So these Cutaway vehicles would be in hand by the end of the year and able to get out on route. The situation currently is that we need 17 vehicles, fixed route vehicles during maximum service to operate our city service. We've got 12 in good working order. So what that has looked like is, throughout COVID response, we have been utilizing larger KU buses so that we can have rear door boarding and that sort of thing. When it gets to August again and they need their fleet of vehicles, our options are going to be limited. So the contractor, First Transit, also has some vehicles that we've used before, but long story short, we really need to get quickly some vehicles ordered so that we can kind of get back to level ground and look at our vehicle fleet replacement plan over the next few years. I wanted you all to be aware of this purchase because, right after you win an electric bus grant to then go purchase a number of other vehicles, I just wanted you to understand why. And these vehicles will be purchased completely with state funds, so there's not going to be a local match required, that sort of thing. So these are budgeted funds that we need to spend before the end of the year, so the state wouldn't revoke those funds. So it's money we need to spend and vehicles we need to buy. But I just wanted you all to be aware of that process. You'll probably see it on a upcoming City Commission agenda item. So are there any questions about that process or thoughts?
Lance Fay, Vice Chair PTAC. How many?
How many are we purchasing?
Yeah.
So Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager, 8 total buses. We're looking at 5 for fixed route and 3 for paratransit. Kind of spreading ourselves a little bit to cover needs on both sides.
Heather Tice, PTAC Chair. Our Cottonwood folks use the paratransit quite a bit, and we have one vehicle that's a Cutaway, and we've had it replaced, over the years through KDOT, and I'll just say they do not last forever at all. They definitely have a shelf life. So I believe that replacing is probably, some of them may just be off the road right now because they're not really in working order, if that's correct. I don't know.
This is Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager, and that's a good point, Heather. This, ultimately, I would like us to be operating all heavy-duty vehicles on our fixed route and not be using cutaways for that purpose, but we have a gap that needs filled, and to give us a little time in order to get our heavy-duty vehicle procurement in order. Ultimately, we're buying a couple big buses a year in order to keep everything in good working order, but we've got a little bit of catch-up to do. So this would help us fill a gap and make sure we're operating safe vehicles in the meantime.
Yep.
And by the time they're hitting their life, hopefully we're on a little better footing.
Bill Wilson, PTAC. So am I correct in understanding, or did I hear you say that all these new buses are going to be procured by means of a state grant covering them entirely? That would be one question. And then the other was, if this is a response to the virus issue, I would think there would be funding for that, not place, anyway. And then the last was, and forgive me for not understanding the arrangement, but what's First Transit have to do with all this? Are they not the ones that own the buses and operate everything? So, keep that.
This is Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. So First Transit is our contractor. We contract with them to operate the service, but we provide the means to do that. So we own all our buses. We purchase the buses, they just operate them. So that answers that piece of the question. Yes, so the money is, there are state formula grant funds that we receive every year. So it's all state money. We kind of decide how much we need to use on operating purposes and how much we need to use on vehicle replacement. So these vehicles we purchased with all state money that we've already allocated. We just haven't, we've put it in the right line item. We just haven't spent it. Back to you, Heather.
All right. Heather, oh, go ahead.
Oh, just back to you.
All right, Heather Tice, PTAC or chair. So you've already talked about the electric buses too, or are we moving on to quick updates number 2, electric bus grant and timeline?
This is Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. I know we're over time, so I'll be quick. I just wanted to give you, hopefully everyone saw the wonderful news that we got awarded $3.75 million of federal grant money to procure electric buses. I have to give a lot of credit to Jessica Mortinger, the interim transit manager, and also Margareta DeVries from KU. Both of them were very instrumental in that successful grant and spent a ton of time doing it. So I feel very fortunate to have stepped in and be able to talk about this great award that we've gotten. So kind of the timeline looking forward, we have probably over the next 6 months is when we'll be kind of finalizing the FTA award, getting that money in, as well as finalizing contracts with vendors. Our particular grant application included vendor partnerships, so we have already, in the context of submitting the grant, we know who is going to provide our buses, which is Gillig, and we have a project management partner, which is the Center for Transportation and the Environment, and we know what charging infrastructure we're looking at, which is ChargePoint. So those partnerships are identified, but we need to solidify the contracts for all of that. In the first half of next year is when we would be doing a lot of the project planning and with the help of CTE doing the project management for us, but would definitely include this group as we think about how we can best deploy electric buses in our system. And we'd look at procuring those buses before, sometime in that first half of next year. It will take about a year for the buses to arrive, so we're looking at mid to late 2022 before we've got buses in hand and are able to actually start driving and testing and seeing how they perform. So I just wanted to provide that general update. It's a very exciting thing for us to be able to do, but buses aren't going to hit the street tomorrow, so I just wanted us all to be aware of how that kind of plays out. But I'm happy to answer questions about that.
Mike Wazkowski, PTAC member. You mentioned ChargePoint for the infrastructure. Have you been in discussions with Evergy and the Clean Charge Network as well?
So we have not yet had discussions with Evergy. I think that's a partnership opportunity that we do need to continue to explore. So, ChargePoint is the hardware, but as far as someone helping, helping partner with us to get those in or to help provide funding for that, that's an opportunity that we can still explore, and we plan to. So those discussions were not able to happen prior to the grant being submitted, and now we've got some work to do to have those at this point.
Any other comment? Heather Tice, PTAC chair, any other comment? Okay. Our last agenda item is the next meeting is July 13th, 2020. I imagine we'll still be in Zoom mode. Would you agree, Adam?
Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager. We'll try to communicate about that more clearly in a couple weeks. I think there might be some opportunities for things to be done a little differently, but maybe not ready to commit to that yet. I think in general, moving forward, we're going to try to maintain Zoom as an option. So if people want to continue to do that, I think we're going to try to facilitate that. But I'll learn a little more over the next couple weeks about how much in person we can be.
Heather Tice, PTAC chair. I just wanted to make sure that we talked about it a little bit. Everybody, just keep an eye out whether or not we're meeting via Zoom, or if you're more comfortable via Zoom, I think that that'll still be an option going forward, at least for the time being. And with that, if there's anything else, I'll wait before we adjourn. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. It is 5:31, so we're 1 minute over. But I appreciate everybody. Be safe and take care, and we'll see you in a month. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Lego, everyone.